The small shuttle drifted through the void like a leaf on dark water. Inside, Kang Mirai sat with her hands folded in her lap, watching the massive alien warship grow larger in the viewport. Her heart beat steady and slow. She had trained herself for this moment over the past 3 weeks, learning to control her fear until it became something she could carry without trembling. The Velthron flagship looked like a living thing. Its hull pulsed with bioluminescent veins that ran across armor plating thick enough to withstand nuclear strikes. Weapon ports lined its surface like the eyes of a spider, each one tracking her shuttle as it approached. The ship was called the Cathanis Eternal, and it was 12 kilometers long. Her shuttle could fit inside one of its hangar bays 50 times over. "They're scanning us again," her pilot said. His name was Kim Taman, and his voice shook despite his best efforts. "That's the 7th time." "Let them look," Mirai said. "They won't find anything." Because there was nothing to find. No weapons, no defense shields, no hidden technology. Just her, Taman, and a single data tablet that contained Earth's response to the Velthron ultimatum. She had insisted on this approach. The military leaders had argued for days, but she had been firm. They would send her alone and unarmed, or they would send no one at all. The shuttle passed through an energy barrier that made Mirai's teeth ache. Then they were inside the hangar, and she could see the true scale of the Velthron war machine. Hundreds of fighter craft hung from docking clamps above them. Each one bristled with weapons that could level a city block. Soldiers moved in formation across the deck, their footsteps synchronizing in a rhythm that sounded like distant thunder. The shuttle landed with a soft bump. Mirai stood and smoothed her simple gray suit. No military uniform, no symbols of rank or nation. Just a woman in business clothes carrying a tablet. "I'll wait here," Taman said. He gripped the controls so hard his knuckles had gone white. "Good luck, Ambassador." Mirai nodded and walked to the airlock. The door opened, and the air that rushed in was warm and smelled like copper, and something organic she couldn't identify. She stepped onto the deck of the alien warship. 6 Velthron soldiers surrounded her immediately. They were massive, each one standing over 3 meters tall. Their bodies were covered in segmented exoskeletons that looked both grown and built, as if biology and technology had merged into something new. Tubes ran from their spines to their weapons. Their faces were hidden behind helmets that glowed with targeting displays. One of them gestured with a weapon that hummed with contained energy. Mirai walked where it pointed, keeping her pace steady and her hands visible at her sides. They moved through corridors that twisted and curved like the inside of a massive organism. The walls were warm to the touch. She could feel a pulse in them, slow and powerful. Other Velthrons watched as she passed. Some stopped their work to stare. She heard sounds that might have been their language, harsh and clicking with undertones that vibrated in her chest. None of them had ever seen a human before. Earth was far from their empire, isolated in a quiet arm of the galaxy. Until 6 months ago, they hadn't known humans existed. Then human colony ships had crossed into space the Velthrons claimed as theirs. The response had been immediate. The Armada had assembled, 4,000 warships strong, and traveled to Earth's outer colonies. Their message had been simple: submit or die. The soldiers brought her to a vast chamber that might have been a command center or a throne room. It was hard to tell where technology ended and living tissue began. Screens floated in the air like soap bubbles displaying star maps and ship formations. The floor felt soft beneath her shoes, almost like walking on skin. At the center of the room stood Commander Vorath. He was larger than the soldiers, his exoskeleton more elaborate, decorated with marks that Mirai guessed indicated rank or victories. When he turned to face her, she felt the weight of his attention like a physical thing. His helmet retracted, flowing back into his armor like liquid metal, and she saw his face for the first time. It wasn't as alien as she expected. 2 eyes, though they were golden and had no pupils. A mouth, though it was filled with too many teeth. The structure of his skull was wrong, the proportions off in ways that made her hindbrain scream danger. But she could read expressions there. Right now, he looked amused. "You are the human emissary," Vorath said. His voice came from somewhere in his chest, translated by technology she couldn't see into words she could understand. "You came alone, unarmed." "Yes," Mirai said. "This is an insult." Vorath moved closer, and she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. "When the Korthans sent an unarmed emissary, we took it as mockery. We reduced their homeworld to glass." "The Korthans were fools," Mirai said calmly. "I am not here to insult you, Commander. I'm here because weapons would be pointless. You have 4,000 ships. We have 340. If we wanted to threaten you with force, we would need to bring our entire fleet. Instead, I brought myself. Vorath studied her for a long moment. Then he made a sound that the translator rendered as laughter, though it sounded like rocks grinding together. You're either very brave or very stupid, he said. Perhaps both. You have your 40 seconds to speak. Then I will decide if you leave this ship alive. Mirai activated her tablet. A hologram appeared above it, showing a star map of the disputed territory. Earth rejects your ultimatum, she said. We will not surrender. We will not join your empire, but we also will not fight a war we cannot win. Then you will die, Vorath said simply. My ships will burn your colonies. Your homeworld will fall. Your species will be added to our empire as a servitor class. These are the only options you have. There is a third option, Mirai said. She changed the display to show coordinates in the Kuiper Belt, far beyond Earth's outer planets. In 72 hours, we will demonstrate why attacking humanity would be a mistake. Not because we can defeat your fleet in battle, but because the cost of conquering us would be higher than any victory is worth. Vorath's eyes narrowed. What demonstration? Send a battle group to these coordinates, Mirai said. We will show you what humanity has built. After you see it, you can make an informed decision about whether to proceed with your invasion. You expect me to delay my attack based on promised tricks? Vorath leaned down until his face was level with hers. His breath was hot and smelled like burning metal. I have conquered 17 species, human. 17. Each one believed they had some secret weapon that would save them. Each one died screaming. Then one more delay won't hurt, Mirai said. Her voice didn't shake. 72 hours. If our demonstration doesn't convince you, then begin your invasion. We won't resist. But if you attack without seeing what we've prepared, you'll be making a decision without full information. Is that how a commander of your reputation operates? The chamber fell silent except for the pulse of the walls and the soft sounds of the floating displays. Vorath straightened and turned away from her. He looked at his officers, who stood around the room like statues. Mirai couldn't read their body language, couldn't tell what they were thinking. Finally, Vorath turned back. 72 hours, he said. I will send 200 ships to your coordinates. If your demonstration is not impressive, they will destroy whatever is there. Then they will return here, and we will proceed with the invasion of your colonies. You will remain aboard the ship as my guest until the time expires. Guest is a generous word for hostage, Mirai said, but I accept. Vorath made that grinding laugh again. You are interesting, human. Most species beg or bluster when facing extinction. You do neither. I wonder if you will still be calm when you watch your demonstration fail. I guess we'll find out together, Mirai said. She was escorted to a small chamber that might have been a cell or quarters, it was hard to tell. The walls were the same warm, pulsing material as the rest of the ship. There was something like a bed, raised from the floor as if it had grown there. A screen on one wall showed the view outside, the stars visible beyond the Armada. Mirai sat on the bed and closed her eyes. Her hands were shaking now, the fear finally catching up to her. She allowed herself 5 minutes to tremble, to feel the full weight of what she had just done. Then she took a deep breath and became still again. 72 hours. In that time, humanity would either save itself or doom itself. And she would watch it happen from the heart of an enemy warship, alone and unarmed among aliens who had crushed 17 civilizations. She opened her tablet and began composing a message to Dr. Park Junho. It would take hours to reach him through the quantum relay, but she needed to tell him. Everything depended on him now, on his team, on the impossible thing they had built in secret while the galaxy wasn't looking. Her message was simple. The clock is running. Don't fail us. She sent it into the void and waited for humanity's answer to arrive. 6 months before Mirai stepped onto the Veltron flagship, Dr. Park Junho sat in a laboratory that shouldn't exist, staring at data that shouldn't be possible. The lab was called Prometheus Ring, and it floated in orbit around Neptune, hidden from casual scans by the planet's magnetic interference and careful engineering. The station was small, just 43 people working in cramped corridors, but the work they did there would determine whether humanity had a future. Junho rubbed his eyes and looked at the screens again. The numbers hadn't changed. They still showed the same impossible thing they had shown for the past 6 weeks. Human consciousness could interface with quantum computers, Not through implants or surgery, but through something the human brain had developed naturally over millions of years of evolution. "You need to sleep," said Dr. Choi Yoonji, his second-in-command. She stood in the doorway with 2 cups of coffee, both steaming in the cold air of the station. "You've been awake for 36 hours. "Can't sleep," Junho said, accepting one of the cups. "I keep thinking I made a mistake somewhere, that I'm seeing patterns that aren't really there." "You didn't make a mistake," Yoonji said. She pulled up a chair and sat beside him. "We've verified your work 20 different ways. It's real, Junho. Humans can do this." Junho took a long drink of coffee and pulled up a video file. It showed the interior of a test chamber from 3 weeks ago. A man sat in a chair wearing no equipment except for the sensors attached to his scalp. In front of him, a small drone hovered, its systems running on a quantum computer core. The man's name was Lee Hyunwoo, and he was an engineer who had volunteered when Junho put out a call for test subjects. On the video, Hyunwoo closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Nothing happened for 10 seconds. Then the drone moved. It didn't respond to voice commands or hand gestures. It moved because Hyunwoo thought about moving it. The drone spun, accelerated, and performed maneuvers that would have required complex programming. All of it controlled by human thought alone. "I still don't understand how it works," Yoonji said, watching the video for the 100th time. "Our brains aren't computers. We don't process information the same way." "That's exactly why it works," Junho said. He stood and walked to a whiteboard covered in equations and diagrams. "Computers are logical. They process information in sequence following rules. But human brains are quantum systems. We process multiple possibilities at once. When we imagine something, we're running simulations in our heads. When we make decisions, we're collapsing probability waves." He drew a quick sketch of a neuron. "For millions of years, humans made tools. We learned to see objects as extensions of ourselves. A hammer becomes part of your arm. A car becomes part of your body. Our brains evolved to blur the line between self and tool. And quantum computers, it turns out, can recognize that pattern. They can feel our intention and respond to it." "It sounds like magic," Yoonji said. "It is magic," Junho said, smiling for the first time in days. "But it's magic that only humans can do. We tested it with samples from other species. Velthran neural tissue doesn't show the same quantum coherence patterns. Neither do any of the other alien species we have data on. This is uniquely human." The door to the lab slid open and Captain An Soo-jin entered. She was the military liaison to Prometheus Ring, and she always looked like she wished she was somewhere else. The station was cramped, the air was stale, and the work was theoretical. She preferred solid things, ships with weapons and armor plating. "The military council rejected your proposal again," Soo-jin said without preamble. "They think it's too risky, too untested." Junho felt his brief moment of happiness drain away. "Did you show them the test results?" "I showed them everything," Soo-jin said. She leaned against the wall and crossed her arms. "They don't doubt that it works. They doubt that it will work in combat. And they're worried about the risks to the pilots." "The risks," Junho repeated. His voice was flat. "The Velthrons are going to exterminate us, and they're worried about risks?" "They're worried about sending pilots into a system that might burn out their brains," Soo-jin said. "Your own data shows that prolonged interface causes neural fatigue. Some of your test subjects had seizures. One had a stroke." "That was in the early tests," Yoonji interjected. "We've improved the safety protocol since then. But you can't eliminate the risk entirely," Soo-jin said. "Can you promise me that every pilot who uses this system will come out of it with their mind intact?" The lab fell silent. On the screens, the video of Hyunwoo controlling the drone played on loop, but no one was watching it anymore. "No," Junho admitted. "I can't promise that. The human brain wasn't meant to process information at the speed the system requires. Every time a pilot interfaces, they're pushing their neurons to the absolute limit. Some of them will suffer permanent damage. Some might die." "Then you understand why the council is hesitant," Soo-jin said. "I understand that they're choosing certain death over possible death," Junho said, his voice rising. "The Velthrons have 4,000 warships. We have 340. Even if every one of our ships performed perfectly, we'd lose. The only advantage we have is this system. The only thing that might make them hesitate is showing them something they've never seen before, something they can't predict or counter." Soo-jin pushed off from the wall and walked to the window. Outside, Neptune's blue bulk filled the view, storm swirling across its surface. I'm on your side, Doctor. But I need you to give me something concrete, a demonstration that will convince the Council this isn't just theory. Junho looked at Yunji, then at the screens showing months of research data. Then he looked at the door that led to the station's small flight bay, where they kept a single modified fighter craft that had been built specifically for testing the interface system. We'll give them a demonstration, Junho said. Tomorrow. Live test full combat simulation. If it works, they'll have to approve the project. If it doesn't, he didn't finish the sentence. The next morning, Lee Hyunwoo sat in the cockpit of the modified fighter, though calling it a cockpit wasn't quite accurate anymore. There were no manual controls, no displays, no instruments of any kind. Just a chair and a neural interface crown that rested on his head so light he barely felt it. How are you feeling? Junho's voice came through the comm system. Nervous, Hyunwoo admitted. This is different from controlling a drone. A ship has so many systems, so much complexity. Don't think about the systems, Junho said. Think about where you want to go, what you want the ship to do. Let your intention guide it. The quantum computer will handle the details. Hyunwoo closed his eyes and took a slow breath. He had synesthesia, a condition where his senses mixed together. He saw sounds as colors, felt textures as tastes. The doctors had told him it was a quirk of his neural wiring, cross-connections that shouldn't exist. But Junho thought it was what made him perfect for this role. His brain was already comfortable with information arriving in unusual ways. The fighter's systems came online, and Hyunwoo felt them, not as data or readouts but as extensions of his body. The engines were his legs. The maneuvering thrusters were his hands. The hull sensors were his skin. He could feel the vacuum of space around him, cold and vast. Interface stable, Yunji reported from the control room. Neural patterns are strong. Hyunwoo, you're cleared for undocking. Hyunwoo thought about moving forward and the fighter responded instantly. No delay, no input lag. The ship slid out of the hangar and into open space as smoothly as his own hand moving through water. Beautiful, Soo-jin muttered, watching from the observation deck. Around her, military officers and council members watched with varying expressions of skepticism and wonder. Beginning combat simulation, Junho announced. Hyunwoo, you'll see targets appear on your sensors. Defensive drones programmed with standard Veltran attack patterns. Try to evade them. Hyunwoo saw the drones before the sensors did. He felt their positions in space like pressure points on his skin. When they opened fire, he was already moving, the fighter spinning and diving in ways that should have made him sick. But he didn't feel motion. He was the motion. There was no separation between pilot and machine. The drones fired again and again, their targeting computers trying to predict his movements. But Hyunwoo didn't move according to patterns or algorithms. He moved by instinct and intuition, making decisions too fast for conscious thought. His brain and the quantum computer worked together. Human creativity merged with machine precision. In the observation deck, the military officers watched in silence as the single human fighter danced through a field of hostile drones, evading every shot. It moved like nothing they had ever seen, like a living thing rather than a machine. How long can he maintain this? One of the officers asked. Huno checked his displays. Neural stress is building. I'd say 30 minutes before we need to pull him out. Maybe 40 if he's strong. 30 minutes, Soo-jin repeated. That's not a long battle. It's long enough, Junho said. Long enough to make a difference. And we're working on ways to extend it. Hyunwoo brought the fighter back to the hangar 23 minutes after undocking. When the interface crown was removed, he slumped in the chair, his face pale and sweating. Medical staff rushed to check his vitals while Junho watched anxiously. I'm okay, Hyunwoo said, though his hands were shaking. I'm okay. It was incredible, like being a god for 20 minutes, but also like running a marathon while solving math problems. My brain feels like it's vibrating. You did perfectly, Junho said. Rest now. We'll monitor you for the next 24 hours. In the observation deck, the military council was in heated discussion. Soo-jin listened to them argue about feasibility and risks and strategic value. Finally, the senior officer, Admiral Kim Dae-hyun, raised his hand for silence. Dr. Park, Dae-hyun said into the comm. Can you build more of these systems? Enough to retrofit our fleet? Not the whole fleet, Junho said. The quantum cores are difficult to produce and we'd need to modify each ship's systems. But we could equip 50, maybe 70 ships in the time we have. And pilots? We'd need volunteers. People willing to accept the risks. Daehyun looked at the other officers, then back at the screen showing the fighter in the hangar. We'll find volunteers. Humanity isn't short on people willing to sacrifice for survival. Your project is approved, Dr. Park. You have 4 months to prepare as many ships as possible. Make us a fleet that can make the Velthrons hesitate. After the council left, Junho sat alone in the lab staring at the screens. 4 months to build a miracle. 4 months to train pilots in a system that might destroy their minds. 4 months to create humanity's only chance at survival. Yoonji found him there hours later, still sitting in the dark. Are you okay? She asked. I just condemned dozens of people to brain damage, and Junho said quietly. Maybe hundreds. They'll volunteer because they're brave and because humanity needs them, and some of them will die or lose their minds because of my invention. Or they'll save everyone, Yoonji said. She sat beside him. You're giving humanity a chance, Junho. Without this, we're just targets. With it, we might survive. Junho nodded but didn't feel comforted. Outside the window, Neptune's storms raged, beautiful and terrible. In 4 months, humanity would learn if his gambit would save them or damn them. All he could do was work and hope. 72 hours passed like a held breath. Mirai spent them in her chamber aboard the Cathonis Eternal, watching the countdown on her tablet and trying not to think about everything that could go wrong. The Velthrons left her alone, except for twice daily visits from guards who brought food she couldn't eat and asked questions she didn't answer. She could feel the ship's pulse through the walls, that constant rhythm like a heartbeat, and sometimes she wondered if the ship was aware of her presence, if it was watching her the way she watched it. On the morning of the demonstration, Commander Vorath came to her chamber personally. His footsteps announced his arrival long before the door opened, each one heavy enough to make the floor vibrate. It is time, human, he said. Your people have arrived at the coordinates. My battle group is prepared to engage. Mirai stood and straightened her suit, which had become wrinkled over the past 3 days. I want to watch from your command center. You will watch from a cell, Vorath said. If this is a trap, if your people try something foolish, I want you where I can reach you quickly. If this were a trap, Commander, I wouldn't be here, Mirai said. I'd be safely back on Earth watching from a distance, but I came to your ship unarmed and stayed as your hostage. I think I've earned the right to see this through. Vorath studied her with those golden pupilless eyes. Then he made that grinding sound that might have been a laugh. You are either brave or insane. I still haven't decided which. Come, you may watch. But if your demonstration disappoints me, you will die first before the invasion begins. Fair enough, Mirai said. The command center was full of activity when they arrived. Velthran officers moved between stations, their voices creating a harsh symphony of clicks and vibrations. The floating screens showed the battle group departing from the main fleet, 200 warships moving in perfect formation toward the Kuiper Belt. Mirai took her position near one of the screens, close enough to see but not so close that she'd be in the way. Her heart was hammering now, all the calm she had maintained for 3 days starting to crack. Everything humanity had worked for, everything Junho and his team had built would be tested in the next hour. The Velthron battle group arrived at the coordinates with military precision. The ship spread out into an attack formation that had been refined over centuries of conquest. Each warship took a position that maximized firepower while minimizing blind spots. It was textbook strategy, perfect and deadly. I see 12 human ships, one of Vorath's officers reported. Frigate class. No heavy armor, minimal weapon systems. 12 ships, Vorath repeated. He looked at Mirai. You asked me to bring 200 warships to face 12 frigates? This is your demonstration? Wait, Mirai said. Her mouth was dry. Just watch. The human ships were small compared to the Velthron warships, each one barely 100 meters long. They floated in a loose cluster, their hulls dark against the starfield. To the Velthron sensors, they must have looked like easy targets. Hardly worth the ammunition. Then the demonstration began. The 12 human ships moved, and the Velthron command center fell silent. They didn't move like ships. They moved like a school of fish, like starlings in murmuration, like a single organism with 12 bodies. There was no delay between them, no communication lag. They simply moved as one, flowing around each other with impossible precision. Battle Group Commander is requesting permission to engage, an officer said. Granted, Vorath said, leaning forward. Let's see what these humans can do. 50 Velthron warships opened fire. Energy beams and projectile weapons filled the space where the human ships had been a fraction of a second earlier. But the humans were already gone, already somewhere else, moving in patterns that didn't follow any tactical doctrine the Velthrons recognized. One human frigate, the lead ship piloted by Lee Hyunwoo, did something that made the Velthron officers gasp. It accelerated directly toward 3 enemy warships, its engines burning at levels that should have torn the ship apart. At the last possible moment, it spun on its axis and fired its maneuvering thrusters in a sequence so complex it looked random. The ship threaded the needle between the Velthron vessels, passing through a gap that existed for less than a second. The Velthron ships tried to track it, tried to follow its trajectory, but their computers couldn't predict where it would go next. Because Hyunwoo himself didn't know where he would go next. He was making decisions faster than conscious thought. His brain and the quantum computer working together to find paths through chaos. How are they doing this? An officer demanded. There's no communication between their ships. No coordination signals. It's as if they share a single mind. Maybe they do, Mirai said quietly. She was watching Hyunwoo's ship perform the maneuver that would later be called the Phantom Weave, and she felt pride mixed with terror. Pride because it was working, because humanity's desperate gamble was paying off. Terror because she knew what it was costing the pilots. The battle, if it could be called a battle, continued for 11 minutes. The Velthron ships fired thousands of rounds and dozens of energy beams. They used tactics that had defeated fleets 10 times the size of the human force. None of it mattered. The human ships were everywhere and nowhere. They anticipated attacks before they happened, moved through firing solutions like ghosts, and struck back with precision that seemed impossible. They didn't destroy the Veltron ships. Mirai had insisted on non-lethal demonstrations, but they disabled them. Engines destroyed, weapon systems offline, communication arrays melted to slag. 47 Veltron warships went dark. The remaining 3 retreated, pulling back to the main battle group with damage reports that would take hours to fully compile. The command center was absolutely silent. Every Velthron officer stared at the screens, at the impossible thing they had just witnessed. 12 ships had defeated 50 in a straight fight. 12 small frigates had outmaneuvered, outthought, and outfought warships designed to crush planets. Vorath turned slowly to look at Mirai. His expression was unreadable, alien in ways she couldn't parse. When he spoke, his voice was very quiet. "What are you?" "We're human," Mirai said. "And we're different from the other species you've conquered. You can predict them, calculate their breaking points, model their behavior. But you can't model us. You can't calculate chaos." She pulled up data on her tablet and projected it into the air between them. "Your tactical computers rely on pattern recognition. You input enemy behavior, and your systems predict their next move. But human pilots don't follow patterns. Every decision they make is influenced by intuition, creativity, instinct. By a million years of evolution that taught us to use tools as extensions of ourselves." She changed the display to show neural scans of the pilots during combat. "Our brains are quantum systems, Commander. We process multiple possibilities simultaneously. When we interface with our ships, we don't just control them, we become them. The ship's sensors are our eyes, the engines are our muscles. And in that state, we move faster than thought, faster than prediction." Vorath looked at the neural scans, at the combat footage playing on repeat, at his officers who still seemed to be in shock. "This is not possible. Consciousness cannot interface with technology this way. Our scientists proved it centuries ago." "Your scientists proved that Velthron consciousness can't interface this way," Mirai corrected. "But we're not Velthron. We're human, and our evolution took a different path." One of the officers found his voice. "Commander, we should attack immediately, before they can deploy this technology across their entire fleet. If we wait, if we give them time to prepare more ships with this system, we'd lose," Vorath finished. He was still staring at the screens. "Even with our superior numbers, we would lose, because we can't predict them. Every engagement would be like fighting shadows. Our losses would be catastrophic." "You have 2 choices," Mirai said. "You can proceed with the invasion and win eventually, because you do have superior numbers. But it will cost you thousands of ships and decades of fighting. Or you can negotiate." "Negotiate," Vorath repeated the word as if it was foreign. "We do not negotiate. We conquer or we leave." "Then leave," Mirai said simply. "But I'm offering you a third option. A treaty, trade agreements, cultural exchange. We don't want to be your enemies, Commander. We just want to be left alone. And in exchange for that, we won't become a threat to your empire. We'll stay in our space. You stay in yours. Vorath walked to the center of the command chamber and his officers parted before him like water. He stood among the floating screens, surrounded by data that showed the impossible thing humanity had achieved. Mirai could see him thinking, calculating, weighing options with the mind of a military commander who had never lost a war. The Sovereign Council must decide, he said finally. I will present your offer and the combat data, but I make no promises, human. You have shown us something new, something we did not expect. That makes you dangerous in ways we cannot easily quantify. Dangerous, Mirai agreed, but not hostile. Remember that, Commander. We came empty-handed. We showed you our capability, but we didn't use it to attack. We disabled your ships but didn't destroy them. Every choice we've made has been about survival, not conquest. Vorath nodded slowly. You will remain here while the Council deliberates. It may take days. I understand, Mirai said, as the Velthron officers began analyzing the combat data in earnest, pulling apart every movement of the human ships, trying to find patterns where none existed. Mirai returned to her chamber. Her legs were shaking now, adrenaline draining away and leaving exhaustion in its wake. She opened her tablet and found a message waiting from Junho. It had arrived during the demonstration, delayed by the vast distance and quantum relay limitations. All 12 pilots extracted safely. Hyunwoo is in critical condition. Neural activity showing patterns we've never seen. 2 others are in medical coma. The rest are stable but exhausted. The system worked, Mirai, but the cost was high. I hope it was worth it. Mirai read the message 3 times, feeling the weight of those words. Critical condition. Medical coma. The cost was high. She had asked these people to risk their minds, their lives, to buy humanity a chance at survival. And they had done it. They had succeeded beyond any reasonable expectation. But success measured in damaged brains and traumatized pilots felt hollow. She composed a response, though she knew it would take hours to reach Earth. Tell them we're grateful. Tell them what they did today might have saved our species. And tell Junho to find a way to reduce the neural cost. Because if this goes to a real war, we'll need hundreds of pilots. And I want as many of them as possible to survive with their minds intact. She sent the message and lay down on the bed that had grown from the floor. Outside, the Velthron Armada waited, 4,000 ships strong, weapons charged and ready. Inside, 12 exhausted human pilots floated in medical bays, their brains recovering from the strain of becoming something more than human for 11 perfect minutes. Everything balanced on a knife's edge. The Sovereign Council would debate and decide. Humanity would wait and hope, and Mirai would stay here, alone in the heart of the alien fleet, trusting that she had done enough, that empty palms and impossible demonstrations would be enough to stay the hand that could destroy them all. The Velthron War Council met in a chamber deep within the Chthonus Eternal, where the walls pulsed red like an angry heart. Commander Vorath stood at the center, while his officers arranged themselves in a circle around him, each one representing a different aspect of the Armada's might. Show them, Vorath said. The combat footage began playing on screens that materialized in the air, 50 Velthron warships against 12 human frigates. The council members watched in silence as the human ships moved like nothing they had ever seen, flowing through space as if the laws of physics were suggestions rather than rules. When the footage ended, showing 47 disabled Velthron vessels and 3 fleeing survivors, the council erupted into harsh clicking debate. Vorath let them argue for a time, watching their reactions, gauging their fear and pride and anger. They cheated, declared Commander Kreth, who led the siege divisions. No species moves like that naturally. They have technology we don't understand, technology that gives them an unfair advantage. War is not fair, responded Commander Silth, whose ship specialized in long-range bombardment. War is about winning, and they won this engagement decisively. A single engagement means nothing, Kreth argued. We have 4,000 ships. They have what, maybe 100 equipped with this system? Lest we overwhelm them with numbers. We accept the losses and crush them anyway. Vorath raised his hand and silence fell immediately. Commander Kreth, how many ships would you lose in such an assault? Kreth's exoskeleton shifted, a sign of discomfort. Acceptable losses would be, how many? Vorath insisted. 2,000, Kreth admitted. Perhaps more. Each human ship would take down 20 of ours before we could disable it. Maybe 30 if their pilots are as skilled as what we just saw. Half our fleet, Vorath said. To conquer a species we didn't even know existed 6 months ago. To claim territory we don't particularly need. To fight an enemy that has offered to negotiate. They are weak, Kreth said. Offering negotiation proves it. They disabled 47 of our ships without destroying a single one, Silth countered. That's not weakness. That's restraint. They're showing us they could have killed those crews but chose not to. That's a message, Kreth. They're saying they can be merciful or merciless and we get to choose which one we face. The debate continued, voices rising and falling in the red chamber. Vorath listened to all of them, but his mind was elsewhere, replaying the combat footage frame by frame. He had fought for 40 years, conquered 17 species, won battles that military academies would study for centuries. He knew warfare in all its forms, and he knew when he was facing something new. The human ships didn't just move unpredictably, they moved impossibly. Their reaction times were too fast, their coordination too perfect, their tactics too creative. It was as if each ship was piloted by a genius who was also psychic, who could read the future and react before events happened. They're using probability manipulation, suggested one officer, some kind of quantum technology that lets them see multiple futures. Or they're networked in ways our sensors can't detect, said another. A hive mind, perhaps, Vorath shook his head. You're thinking like Velthrons. You're trying to explain them using our framework. But what if they simply think differently than we do? What if their brains work in ways ours don't? That brought silence. The idea that another species might have a fundamental cognitive advantage was difficult for the Velthrons to process. Their entire empire was built on the belief that their way of thinking was superior, that their logical, calculated approach to warfare was unbeatable. Commander? Silth said carefully. Are you suggesting we abandon the invasion? I'm suggesting we consider the cost, Vorath said. We came here to expand our territory, to add another species to our empire. But if conquering them costs us half our fleet, if every battle is a nightmare of unpredictable tactics and impossible maneuvers, is the victory worth it? While the Velthron Council debated back on Earth, a different kind of crisis was unfolding. Li Hyunwoo lay in a medical bay aboard Prometheus Ring, his body still but his mind racing through spaces that shouldn't exist. The doctors had induced a coma to protect his brain from the cascading neural storms that had started after he disconnected from the interface. Dr. Park Jun-ho stood beside the bed, watching the brain scans with growing horror. The patterns were beautiful and terrible, neurons firing in sequences that created interference patterns like ripples on water. Hyunwoo's brain was trying to maintain the quantum coherence it had achieved during the interface, even though the connection was severed. He thinks he's still connected, Dr. Choi Yoonji said quietly. Part of his consciousness is still trying to be the ship. Can you bring him back? Captain An Soo-jin asked. She stood at the foot of the bed, her face tight with worry. Behind her, 2 other pilots lay in similar states, their brains caught between human and something else. I don't know, Jun-ho admitted. The words tasted like failure. We knew there would be neural fatigue, but this is different. It's as if the interface opened pathways in their brains that won't close. They experienced being something other than human, and part of them doesn't want to come back. Or can't come back, Unji added. The quantum coherence required for the interface might have permanently altered their neural structure. Soo-jin walked to the window, looking out at Neptune's storms. How many pilots do we have that are still functional? 8, Jun-ho said. Out of 12. The other 4 are here in various states of dissociation. Hyunwoo is the worst. 8 pilots, Soo-jin repeated. If this goes to full war, we'll need hundreds. And if every 4th pilot ends up like this... She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. The math was brutal. To field a fleet of even 50 interface-equipped ships, they'd need to sacrifice dozens of minds. To field 100 ships would require even more, and there was no guarantee the ones who survived would be truly whole when it was over. I'm trying to modify the interface protocols, Jun-ho said, to reduce the neural load. But the problem is fundamental. Human brains weren't designed to process information at quantum speeds. Every time we use the system, we're asking the pilots to be something evolution didn't prepare them for. Then maybe we need to stop asking, Soo-jin said. Hunyo looked at her sharply. What? Maybe we need to admit this system is too dangerous. That the cost is too high. We showed the Velthrons what we can do. Maybe that's enough. Maybe they'll negotiate based on what they've already seen, and we won't need to actually fight. And if they don't negotiate, Yunji asked. If they decide to pay the cost and invade anyway? Sujin had no answer for that. In another part of the station, the 8 functional pilots gathered in a common room, exhausted but alive. They sat in silence mostly, each one processing what they had experienced during the demonstration, being the ship, feeling space and time in ways human senses weren't meant to feel. One of them, a young woman named Kang Jiwoo, finally spoke. Did anyone else feel like they didn't want to come back? The others looked at her. Slowly, some nodded. It was so perfect, Jiwoo continued, being the ship. Moving without the limits of a body, I could think and act at the same time, no delay between intention and action. Coming back to this, she gestured at her own body. Feels slow, limited, like wearing wet clothes. I know what you mean, said another pilot, Nam Ki-hyun. My hands feel wrong now. Too slow, too clumsy. I keep trying to think things into happening and nothing responds. That's the neural adaptation, someone said. It was a medical officer who had been sitting quietly in the corner. Your brains are trying to maintain the quantum coherence patterns from the interface. It will fade over time, probably. Probably, Jiwoo repeated. That's not very reassuring. Nothing about this is reassuring, the medical officer said honestly. You all volunteered knowing the risks, but I don't think any of us truly understood what those risks meant, not until we saw Hyunwoo and the others. The room fell silent again. They had all seen Hyunwoo before he was put into the coma. His eyes open but seeing nothing. His hands moving in patterns as if manipulating controls that weren't there. A man trapped between human and machine, unable to fully be either. If we have to fight again, Ki-hyun said slowly. Will we volunteer again? Nobody answered. But in the silence, Jiwoo saw the truth on their faces. They would volunteer. Because humanity needed them. Because no one else could do what they did. Because despite the cost, despite the fear, they had felt something during those 11 minutes of combat that nothing else in life could match. They had touched transcendence, and some part of them would always hunger to touch it again. Back aboard the Chthonus Eternal, the Velthran Council finally reached a decision. Vorath listened to the vote, his expression neutral even as relief washed through him. 7 votes in favor of opening negotiations, 4 votes for immediate invasion. The debate had been fierce, but in the end, practical concerns had won over pride. The cost of conquering humanity was simply too high for the strategic value gained. Vorath left the council chamber and made his way to Mirai's quarters. He found her sitting by the window watching the stars. She didn't look surprised when he entered. The Sovereign Council has voted, Vorath said. We will not invade, not now. Instead, we will open formal negotiations for a treaty. Mirai closed her eyes briefly, and Vorath saw her shoulders sag with relief. Thank you, Commander. Don't thank me yet, Vorath said. We have also voted to classify humanity as a Tier Omega threat. Do you know what that means? No, Mirai admitted. It means we consider you capable of asymmetric warfare beyond our ability to model. It means any future conflict with your species will require total commitment of resources and acceptance of catastrophic losses. Only 2 other species in known space have this classification, and both of them are far older and more advanced than you. Should I be honored? Mirai asked. You should be careful, Vorath said. This classification protects you, yes. It makes us hesitant to engage you militarily, but it also marks you. Other species will learn of this. Some will respect it. Others will see it as a challenge. You have announced to the galaxy that humanity is dangerous in ways that cannot be easily predicted or countered. We didn't want to be dangerous, Mirai said quietly. We just wanted to survive. Survival often requires danger, Vorath said. He moved to the window and stood beside her, both of them looking out at the fleet. You came to my ship empty-handed, human. No weapons, no guards. I thought you were a fool, but I understand now. You came unarmed because you are the weapon. Your species, your minds, your chaotic, unpredictable way of thinking. That's the threat. And you wrapped it in diplomacy and called it peaceful. Is that what you'll tell the council? Mirai asked. I will tell them the truth, Vorath said. That humanity is more dangerous unarmed than most species are with warships. Because you think in ways we cannot predict, fight in ways we cannot counter, and negotiate with weapons you never draw. That makes you either the most peaceful species I have encountered, or the most dangerous. Possibly both. He turned to leave, then paused. Your pilots, the ones who interfaced with your ships, what will happen to them? I don't know, Mirai admitted. Some of them may never fully recover. They touched something beyond human experience, and it changed them. Vorath nodded slowly. We have stories in our history. Warriors who went into battle and came back wrong, changed by what they had seen and done. We honor them, but we also pity them. They gave pieces of themselves for victory. Perhaps your pilots are the same. After he left, Mirai sat in the darkness and thought about Hyunwoo and the others, their minds caught between worlds. The cost of survival, the price of peace. She had made choices that led to this moment, and people had paid for those choices with pieces of their sanity. She hoped it was worth it. 3 weeks after the demonstration, Earth orbit looked different. Construction drones swarmed around a new vessel, the Indomitable, humanity's first ship built specifically for both diplomatic missions and interface combat. It was beautiful in a harsh way, all clean lines and quantum-conductive hull plating that shimmered like oil on water. Kang Mirai stood in the observation deck, watching the construction, and tried to feel victorious. They had won. The Velthrans had withdrawn their fleet. Treaty negotiations were scheduled to begin in 2 days. Humanity had survived, but victory tasted like ashes when she thought about the price. Ambassador Kang, a voice said behind her. She turned to find Dr. Park Junho looking older than he had 3 weeks ago. New lines had appeared around his eyes, and his shoulders carried a weight that hadn't been there before. Dr. Park, Mirai said, I heard about Lee Hyunwoo. I'm sorry. Junho nodded and moved to stand beside her at the window. He woke up yesterday. Not fully, but enough to speak a few words. He doesn't remember most of the combat. He says the last thing he clearly recalls is entering the interface. Everything after that is fragments, like a dream he can't quite grasp. Will he recover? The doctors don't know. His brain has been permanently altered by the interface. The neural pathways have restructured themselves in ways we've never seen. He might regain full function, or he might stay partially dissociated for the rest of his life. Junho paused. The other 3 are similar. Different degrees of damage, but all changed in fundamental ways. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the construction drones work. Finally, Junho spoke again. I've been working on modifications to the interface system, trying to reduce the neural load. I think I can improve it by maybe 20%, which means pilots could interface for 36 minutes instead of 30, before the risk becomes critical. That's progress, Mirai said, though her voice was hollow. It's not enough, Junho said. The fundamental problem remains. Human brains aren't meant to process quantum information. Every time we use the system, we're asking our pilots to become something they weren't designed to be. Some minds can handle it better than others, but all of them pay a cost. Do you regret creating it? Mirai asked. Junho considered the question for a long time. I regret the necessity of it. I regret that we live in a galaxy where survival requires such sacrifices. But the system itself? No, it saved us. Without it, we'd be facing invasion right now. Our colonies would be burning, so I can't regret giving humanity a chance, even if that chance came at a terrible price. Below them, Earth turned in its ancient orbit, blue and green and beautiful. 3 billion people lived on that world, unaware of how close they had come to extinction, unaware that 12 pilots had burned pieces of their minds away to keep them safe. Have you told the pilots they're heroes? Mirai asked. I have. They don't feel like heroes. Heroes in stories come home whole and triumphant. Our pilots came home damaged and haunted. Junho turned away from the window, but they did volunteer again. When Admiral An Soo-jin asked who would be willing to pilot if we need to demonstrate the system again, all 8 functional pilots raised their hands. Even Kang Ji-woo, who still has tremors in her hands from neural fatigue. Why would they volunteer again? Because they've touched something most people never will. They've been more than human, if only for a few minutes, and some experiences, even terrible ones, are too profound to turn away from. Junho's expression was haunted. I think that scares me more than anything. That we've created something addictive, something that calls to the pilots even as it destroys them. 2 days later, Commander Vorath's shuttle docked with the Indomitable. This time he came unarmed and with only a small guard. This time the meeting was on human territory in human space. Mirai greeted him in the conference room that had been specially built for the negotiations. The chairs were adjustable to accommodate Velthron physiology. The air mixture had been carefully calibrated. Every detail designed to show respect while maintaining equality. Welcome aboard the Indomitable, Commander, Mirai said. "Thank you for coming." Vorath looked around the room with those golden pupilless eyes. "Your ship is impressive. Less biological than ours, but efficient. Clean. We build differently than you do," Mirai agreed. "But we can still find common ground." They sat and the negotiations began. Hours of careful discussion about territorial boundaries, trade agreements, mutual defense clauses. The Velthrons wanted assurances that humanity wouldn't spread their interface technology to other species. Humanity wanted a guarantee that the Velthrons wouldn't share human tactical data with their allies. It was diplomatic chess, each side probing for advantage while trying to build something stable. By the end of the first day, they had the framework of an agreement. By the end of the second, they had something approaching a treaty. "The Accord of Empty Palms," Vorath said, reading the title Mirai had suggested. "You named it after your approach to our first meeting." "I came to your ship unarmed," Mirai said. "No weapons, no tricks, just a willingness to talk. I think that should be remembered." "You made us afraid," Vorath said bluntly. "Not with weapons, but with uncertainty. We couldn't predict you, couldn't model your behavior. That fear made us hesitate. Made us willing to negotiate rather than attack. So yes, your empty palms were more effective than any weapon." "Is that how you'll remember humanity?" Mirai asked. "As the species that won through fear?" "I will remember humanity as the species that survived by being unpredictable," Vorath said. He stood and walked to the window, looking out at Earth hanging in space below them. "We have conquered 17 species. All of them followed patterns we could understand. They built their defenses where logic dictated. They moved their fleets according to strategic principles we recognized. Even when they surprised us tactically, they were still operating within frameworks we understood." He turned back to face her. "But you don't operate within frameworks. You came unarmed when logic dictated force. You showed mercy when tactical advantage suggested ruthlessness. Your pilots fight without patterns, think without predictable logic. You're chaos given form, and chaos is the one thing empires cannot easily conquer." "We're not chaos," Mirai said quietly. "We're just human. We improvise because we have to. We break rules because sometimes the rules don't work. We think in ways that seem unpredictable because our minds evolved differently than yours. Whatever the cause," Vorath said, "the effect is the same. You are dangerous in ways we cannot calculate, and that makes you worthy of respect." He paused. "Your pilots, the ones who flew against us, what will happen to them?" "We're caring for them," Mirai said. "Those who were damaged will receive the best medical treatment we can provide. Those who survived intact will train others if they choose to. We won't force anyone to interface with the system again." "But they will volunteer," Vorath said, "because they've felt what it's like to transcend their limitations. I saw it in your combat data. Your pilots weren't just controlling ships. They were becoming something more. And that's a seductive thing." Before Mirai could respond, an alert chimed on her tablet. She glanced at it and felt her breath catch. "Excuse me, Commander. I need to take this." She stepped into the corridor and accepted the call. Dr. Junho's face appeared and he was smiling, actually smiling for the first time in weeks. "Lee Hyunwoo is awake," Junho said, "fully awake. And he's asking to speak with you." 20 minutes later, Mirai stood in the medical bay aboard Prometheus Ring, looking down at the man who had risked everything to give humanity a chance. Hyunwoo looked thin and tired, but his eyes were clear and focused. "Ambassador Kang," he said, his voice rough from disuse. "Did it work? Did we buy humanity enough time?" "You bought us more than time," Mirai said, sitting beside his bed. "You bought us peace. The Velthrons are withdrawing. We're signing a treaty. Because of what you did, because of what all 12 of you did, humanity will survive." Hyunwoo closed his eyes and Mirai saw tears leak from the corners. "Good, that's good. I don't remember most of it, you know. The combat. Being the ship. It's all fragments now, like trying to remember a dream. But I remember the feeling of it. Being more than myself. Being perfect, if only for a few minutes. Was it worth it?" Mirai asked. "Would you do it again, knowing what it cost?" Hyunwoo opened his eyes and looked at her. "I don't know. Ask me again when my hands stop shaking. When I can think clearly for more than an hour at a time. When I don't wake up trying to feel systems that aren't there." He smiled weakly. "But even damaged, even changed, I'm alive. And so is everyone else. So maybe yes. Maybe it was worth it." The treaty signing took place a week later. aboard the Indomitable with representatives from both species present. Mirai and Vorath stood side by side, each placing their mark on the document that would define humanity's relationship with the Veltran sovereignty for generations to come. When it was done, when the ceremony was complete and the diplomats had all said their pieces, Vorath asked for a private moment with Mirai. They stood together in an empty corridor. These two people who had faced each other as potential enemies and found a different path. "I have a confession," Vorath said. "When you first came to my ship, I was certain you would fail. I thought your demonstration would be impressive but ultimately insufficient. I was prepared to watch you die before ordering the invasion of your colonies." "Why are you telling me this?" Mirai asked. "Because you should know how close we came to war, how narrow the margin of survival was. Your gambit worked, but it could easily have failed. A different council vote, a different set of circumstances, and we would not be signing treaties today." "I know," Mirai said. "I've always known. That's why I came unarmed. If we were going to fail, if humanity was going to fall, I wanted it to be because we tried every option, not because we gave up before we began." Vorath made that grinding sound that was his version of laughter. "Your species is either very wise or very foolish. I'm still not certain which." "Maybe we're both," Mirai said. "Maybe that's what makes us unpredictable." After the Veltran delegation departed, after the treaty was secured and the immediate crisis had passed, Mirai returned to Earth for the first time in months. She stood in her small apartment in Seoul, looking out at the city lights, and tried to process everything that had happened. Her tablet chimed with a message. It was from Captain An Soo-jin, who had been promoted to admiral and given command of the new diplomatic fleet. "The Council wants to know what we should focus on next. More interface-equipped ships? Diplomatic outreach to other species? Fortifying our borders? They're asking what you think we should prioritize." Mirai typed her response carefully. "We should focus on reducing the cost of the interface system, on finding ways to let our pilots transcend without destroying themselves. We won this peace through sacrifice, but we shouldn't have to keep sacrificing our people to maintain it. Innovation should serve humanity, not consume it." She sent the message and then composed another, this one to Hyunwoo and the other pilots. "Thank you, not just for what you did, but for being willing to risk yourselves for people you'll never meet. You've changed the course of human history. You've shown the galaxy that humanity is worth respecting. But more than that, you've shown us what we're capable of when we have to be. You touched something extraordinary and you paid the price for that. We won't forget, and we'll work to make sure future pilots don't have to pay as much." That night, Mirai stood on her balcony and looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Veltran Armada was returning to its territory. Somewhere out there, other species were learning about humanity's new classification as a Tier Omega threat. The galaxy had changed, and humanity's place in it had changed as well. They were no longer an unknown species in a quiet corner of space. They were the architects of chaos, the species that had won a war without fighting it, that had made a military empire hesitate through demonstration rather than destruction. And at the heart of it all was a simple truth. Mirai had walked onto an enemy warship empty-handed, and that empty palm had changed everything. Years later, when historians wrote about the Veltran crisis, they would focus on the technology, the tactical innovations, the diplomatic maneuvering. But Mirai would remember something simpler. She would remember 12 pilots who volunteered to burn pieces of their minds away for a chance at survival. She would remember Vorath's expression when he realized humanity couldn't be predicted. She would remember the feel of the Chthonus Eternal's walls under her hand, warm and pulsing like a living thing. Most of all, she would remember the lesson she had tried to teach the Velthrons, the lesson that had saved humanity, that vulnerability and strength are not opposites, that appearing weak can be the strongest position of all, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk into danger unarmed and trust that your empty palms hold more power than any weapon ever could. The galaxy would learn to respect humanity not for their firepower, but for their adaptability, not for their strength, but for their willingness to be vulnerable, not for following the rules of war, but for rewriting those rules entirely. And in medical bays and training facilities across human space, pilots would continue to volunteer for the interface system, drawn by the promise of transcendence, even as they understood the cost. Because humanity had discovered something that no other species had. That consciousness itself could be a weapon, that the chaotic creativity of the human mind was worth more than any armor or armament. They had entered the galactic stage empty-handed and emerged victorious. And the Armada had logged a new threat level, one that would echo through the centuries. Humanity, unpredictable and impossible to model, too dangerous to attack and too valuable to ignore. In the end, that was enough. It had to be enough, because it was all they had, and somehow, impossibly, it had been enough to survive.